In the private lounge at First Pacific Meridian Bank, Vivian's new husband confronted me, suggesting I sever ties with his wife due to my status as a struggling musician unworthy of associating with men like him. I grinned, anticipation coursing through me. 9 years had led me to this moment. The account number on the folder before me stood for $500 million, all deposited in the bank where Vivian now held the position of chief financial officer. In less than a minute, I would rise from my seat, shake his hand, and effectively escort every dollar out of the bank forever. However, let me first transport you back to the genesis of this tale, for you must comprehend who I was prior to these events. You need to grasp what Vivian said to me on the night she departed. Comprehend how a person transforms from sleeping on a friend's couch in Nashville to overseeing a $500 million portfolio, all while those who doubted him watched from afar. If this is your initial visit here, welcome. And if you're familiar with this channel, you know we avoid sanitized, comforting tales. We delve into the real ones. Before moving forward, click that subscribe button immediately. Post a comment below sharing what you believe Vivian's husband said when I stood up to depart. If this narrative resonates with you as powerfully as I anticipate, it assists more people in finding us. Now let's dive in. My name is Sterling. I am 41 years old. I hail from a small town named Gallatin, Tennessee, approximately 30 miles northeast of Nashville. For 32 years, my father drove a delivery truck. My mother taught second grade at the same elementary school since my birth until the year she retired. We were neither impoverished nor affluent. Alternatively, witness the journey of an individual transitioning from residing on a friend's couch in Nashville to managing a $500 million portfolio, with those who underestimated him looking on from the sidelines. If this is your inaugural visit, welcome. And if you're an established viewer here, you already know we shun polished, soothing narratives. We focus on the genuine ones. Before progressing any further, click that subscribe button right away. Express your thoughts in a comment below about what you think Vivian's husband said when I left the room. If this tale strikes a chord as profoundly as I suspect it will, it helps more people discover us. Now let's delve deeper. My name is Sterling. I am 41 years old. I originate from Gallatin, Tennessee, a small town about 30 miles northeast of Nashville. For 32 years, my father was a delivery truck driver. My mother taught second grade at the same elementary school since my birth until the year she retired. We were neither financially destitute nor wealthy. We were the family who knew all too well the essence of money, as its scarcity was palpable each month when bills arrived. It was music that served as my salvation during childhood, not in a stereotypical manner, but pragmatically. I lacked proficiency in sports, average performance in academics, and hadn't showcased any extraordinary talent that could conventionally earn a father's pride. However, I possessed an uncanny ability to discern sounds. I could sit at a piano, play a tune I heard once on the radio, making it seem like I had been rehearsing it for years. This skill was recognized by my mother when I turned 7. By the age of 12, I was playing music at church every Sunday morning. At 16, I was performing at weddings and local events, earning more money during weekends than my peers made throughout their entire summer jobs. I opted out of college, a decision that shaped everything subsequent in my life. My father viewed it as the gravest mistake he could imagine. My mother wept. Yet I had a strategy, or so I believed. At 18, I relocated to Nashville with $4,000 in savings, and used guitar, and the conviction only youth can possess. For 3 years, I played every bar, open mic, and session gig I could locate. I penned songs for various artists, predominantly country but some crossover pop too. I became adept at recognizing what made a song commercially viable, not just emotionally impactful but structurally and rhythmically designed to succeed. That distinction is crucial. While many musicians can stir emotions, fewer can do so while also prompting a producer to write a check. I was becoming one of the few who could achieve both. It was then that I encountered Vivian. She was 24 and I was 23. At the time, she was employed at the downtown Nashville branch of Cumberland Valley Financial, a mid-sized regional bank, as a junior analyst. She embodied everything I wasn't: organized, credential-focused. She held a finance degree from Vanderbilt, carried a 5-year plan in a leather notebook she kept in her purse, and spoke with an accent that suggested a more sophisticated upbringing than her own. Our encounter took place at a friend's birthday celebration in a restaurant on Broadway. I recall her laughter at something I said, followed by a brief look of surprise as if she hadn't anticipated my humor. For 3 hours, we engaged in conversation while others joined and left the conversation around us. By the end of the night, I had obtained her phone number. Our relationship, lasting 2 years, was the kind that left people puzzled, thinking, how does that fit together? She was methodical, I was impulsive. She set financial targets every 3 months. I scribbled song ideas on napkins scattered throughout my apartment. She donned blazers during weekends. I wore whatever I had slept in. Despite these differences, our relationship functioned, much like things do when two individuals are genuinely interested in each other's world and eager to learn from it. We tied the knot in the springtime with a modest ceremony. Her parents traveled from Charlotte, while mine journeyed up from Gallatin. Our gathering took place at a venue close to the Gulch, hosting approximately 60 guests, including a band I was familiar with from the session scene and a photographer who was owed a favor by me. For the first 2 years of our marriage, we enjoyed harmony, though not perfection. My career flourished as I worked tirelessly on writing sessions, live performances, small commercial and TV licensing deals. Meanwhile, Vivian excelled at the bank, earning promotions. She spoke confidently about her professional advancement in a precise, ambitious, and impressive manner. It was clear she knew her destination and was methodically moving toward it, demonstrating the patience and determination of someone who had studied the route extensively for years. I respected her greatly. However, as Vivian achieved greater success, I found myself increasingly overshadowed in the presence of her colleagues. Her social gatherings were no longer the casual birthday parties on Broadway. They had transformed into different affairs. At eateries in Green Hills, bills arrived in leather folders without scrutiny. Discussions revolved around portfolios, mergers, institutional ties, regional market strategies. For a while I kept up, but then someone would inquire about my work, to which I'd respond with, "I'm finalizing a spec recording for an Austin-based singer-songwriter." The subtle shift in their gaze was perceptible, not unkindness, merely categorization. Musician, creative soul, not quite fitting the mold. Vivian never voiced her opinions directly. Such subtraction in a marriage often doesn't make a grand entrance. It seeps instead. I began to notice that she introduced me differently based on our company. At industry gatherings, she'd say, "This is my husband, Sterling." She portrayed herself as a songwriter, yet there was an air of artifice that made it seem like she was exaggerating its significance. At dinner gatherings with her work associates, she would sometimes introduce me and continue the previous conversation, rather than starting a new one with me. I justified it by telling myself I was being perceptive. 4.5 years into our marriage, during a conversation at our East Nashville rental house's kitchen table, she said something that has echoed in my mind almost daily since then. "Sterling," she said, "I need you to be truthful with me. What will our future look like in 10 years? I need to plan, and I can't plan around uncertainty." I stared at her for a long time. "I'm not an uncertainty," I replied, "but your financial situation is." She spoke softly. The softness of her tone was almost the most painful aspect. She wasn't being cruel, she was just expressing her concern. On her laptop at the table, she opened a spreadsheet detailing our combined earnings for the past 4 years, my licensing deals, session income, a publishing advance from the previous year, along with her salary trajectory. The difference in earnings grew more prominent over time. "This is a business analysis," I stated. "Life can be treated like a business, Sterling." Not to sound cold, but because I've seen what happens to those who don't. A year later, we remained married, but something shifted between us following that conversation. An honest door had been opened, one that could no longer be shut again. The following spring, she filed the divorce papers. She was not cruel about it. There were no dramatic scenes or harsh accusations. No lawyers' threatening letters either. Vivian was never theatrical. Instead, she distributed our scant possessions equitably and wished me well genuinely. She exited East Nashville and ventured towards her previously planned path. I remained in that shared house, now solely mine, later to be vacant by all. Yet the feeling that surfaced was unexpected, not despair or fury, but clarity. Allow me to recount my experiences over the subsequent 18 months. Vivian departed, a detail often misconstrued when this tale is narrated. They presume I crumbled. Instead, I recuperated, persevered, and never dwelled on someone else's sofa. A correction is necessary. I relocated to a compact apartment along Dickerson Pike. I reduced all expenses to bare essentials, and I resumed what I excelled at, writing. Not motivated by inspiration, but dedication, which Vivian unknowingly instilled in me through consistency, the foundation of success. In the 6 months following the divorce, I networked with a music supervisor named Adrian Whitfield via a mutual acquaintance. Adrian evaluated music, cinema, and television, encompassing major broadcasters, premium streaming services, and international collaborations. After hearing 3 of my compositions, he said little and then phoned a week later with a licensing proposal that astonished me. The money wasn't the sole factor. It was the significance of the deal that mattered. It served as confirmation. Initially, 1 deal materialized into 5, then 12. I procured an attorney named Gloria Reyes from Los Angeles, who was astute and well-connected. She began structuring my contracts in ways I hadn't realized were feasible. Rights to publishing, back-end royalties, sunk costs with performance clauses. The economic framework in the music industry, once grasped, and when you have representation within it, is truly remarkable. I wish to emphasize this because I believe that success narratives like mine are often misleading. One often hears, "I worked hard and things improved," yet they neglect to mention the 2 years of struggle in between, where progress seemed elusive and self-doubt lingered. To clarify, following the divorce in year 1, I secured 4 licensing deals. The combined earnings from these, supplemented by session work and a tour across Kentucky and Ohio, amounted to approximately $148,000. This figure far surpassed any annual income during my marriage, yet it also represented my most substantial expenditures. Among these were the apartment rent, attorney's retainer, new equipment, and personal health insurance costs. Essentially, I balanced out my expenses. That was my target. In year 2, I formally joined Adrian's agency. This wasn't just individual placements. It was a contractual agreement granting his team the authority to present my music catalog to any production seeking music tailored to specific emotional tones. By that point, I had accumulated approximately 300 original compositions spanning various genres, tempos, and moods, giving my catalog a standalone commercial value. The second year's income almost doubled. In the third year, my first significant television placement occurred. An instrumental piece was repeatedly used as a motif for a character throughout an entire season of a drama on a major streaming platform, 8 episodes. The one-time fee and back-end royalties were substantial. I remember the shock when I received the first royalty statement for that piece, causing me to spend a considerable amount of time at my kitchen table rechecking the figures due to disbelief. My lawyer, Gloria, remarked that year something I've shared with others countless times. "Sterling, your main risk now is not earning enough money. The primary danger you face is failing to comprehend your income sources thoroughly. Let's rectify that." She introduced me to a CPA in Nashville who specialized in structuring entertainment royalties, and a financial planner named Tobias Reed, with extensive experience in the country music industry managing portfolios for artists and behind-the-scenes personnel. Tobias was instrumental in introducing me to my cousin, Declan, involved in private equity, who initiated discussions about wealth's true magnitude at scale. Within 4 years post-divorce, I accrued more wealth than I had earned during the entire previous decade. Within 6 years, I began collaborating with investment advisors in Nashville and New York. A family member, Declan, ventured into private equity, linking me with a wealth management firm. It was then that I grasped, for the first time, what it implied to possess money rather than earn it. In an 8-year span, my portfolio had grown substantially, making me a sought-after client by various financial institutions, to the point where I was no longer waiting in ordinary rooms for meetings, but being invited to private lounges instead. In the 9th year, I chose to open an account at First Pacific Meridian Bank because Vivian, my ex-wife, had become its CFO. However, I feel it is important to disclose something to you. While part of my decision was strategic, coincidental even, it would not be entirely truthful to say that was the whole story. A significant factor, a genuine one, was my curiosity to experience being on the other side of a bank relationship manager's desk at an institution run by my ex-wife, and presenting a portfolio summary that symbolized what she once believed I was incapable of achieving. I didn't have a specific plan or intention beyond opening the account. I wasn't attempting to manipulate anything, but I also wasn't so naive as to think there would be no repercussions. For the initial 3 months, I didn't meet Vivian. My professional interactions were with Preston Cole, a private wealth advisor at the bank who was sharp, professional, and excelled in his role. I visited the office on West End Avenue in Nashville for our quarterly evaluations. The building was magnificent, boasting a marble lobby and understated signage. It conveyed wealth through its air of nonchalance. On my fourth visit, Vivian was in the lobby. She emerged from a conference room with two unfamiliar individuals, engaging them with her usual focused energy. Upon spotting me, she halted. There was a brief silence between us. "Sterling," she said, followed by her name, "Vivian." She appeared genuinely well, composed, and confident. She displayed a different kind of sophistication compared to our Nashville days in our 20s. She wore a well-tailored, uncomplicated outfit and seemed someone who was fully aware of the building's layout and the journey that led her there. "You asked if Preston was working with me, and it wasn't really a question. He is." She praised him as excellent, adding that it was a good choice. We chatted for about 4 minutes in the lobby, our conversation being polite and professional, devoid of any emotional upheaval or forced friendliness or hostility. It was a meeting of two mature individuals with a shared history who could coexist in the same space. I stayed in my car parked in the garage for 10 minutes after that, simply allowing myself to feel whatever I felt, which turned out to be less dramatic than anticipated. Primarily, I felt peculiar, similar to how one feels when something long-awaited finally materializes. 3 months later, I met her husband, Bradford Holt, III. Visualize the name before I describe him, as it carries a lot of weight. He was 47, his silver hair carefully maintained, a height that commanded space naturally. He amassed his wealth through commercial real estate development, chiefly in Nashville, Charlotte, and Atlanta. He wore this affluence ostentatiously, much like some men wear expensive watches, making it a dominant aspect of his communication. 2 years after our divorce, he wed Vivian. I learned about their union via mutual acquaintances. Despite Nashville's size, the intersecting worlds of finance and music licensing in the city are quite compact. It was said that he would casually disclose his property dimensions within the first 10 minutes of meeting someone. Our encounter was entirely fortuitous. Preston invited me to a bank client appreciation event, held on a Thursday evening at the office, an after-work gathering offering drinks and light refreshments, designed for networking purposes. I nearly declined the invitation. However, Gloria, my attorney, emphasized the importance of attending such events when managing a portfolio at this level, as it helps in cultivating institutional relationships beyond merely transactional ones. Bradford attended due to being Vivian's spouse, with Vivian as the CFO at her bank hosting an event. He introduced himself to me at the hors d'oeuvres table, offering a strong handshake and quickly appraising me. "Bradford Holt," he declared. "And you're Sterling?" I responded, introducing myself. "Malone," he inquired about my profession. "Music," I replied. "Licensing, publishing." His fleeting expression was discernible. "So the music person." "Deals happening in real time," he commented. "Yes," I agreed. He seemed slightly surprised by First Pacific's involvement with creative individuals. He mentioned creative people as one might discuss amateur athletes, neither approving nor disapproving. "They do business when the figures align," I explained. He smiled and we parted ways for the rest of the event. That evening I didn't give it much thought. The second encounter was distinct. 2 months later, during my routine quarterly meeting with Preston, we conversed in one of the private rooms off the main floor. This time, our interaction was different. In a room with glass walls, dim light, and a table seating 8 but only occupied by 2, we were going over portfolio performance and making allocation adjustments, as was customary. The door creaked open and Bradford Holt entered. Preston glanced up in slight surprise. "Mr. Holt, we're currently with a client," he stated. "I know," Bradford replied, avoiding eye contact with Preston and focusing on me instead. I signaled for Preston to leave, and he did so, leaving the seat vacant, which Bradford promptly filled. Leaning comfortably on the table, he said, "I'll be straightforward. I know your identity, that you were married to Vivian. And I must tell you, I think there's an underlying unease about having you as a client at this institution, given our past connection." I remained silent as he continued. "Vivian has handled everything with unwavering integrity. You don't find it advantageous to have your ex-spouse associated with our bank, living in the same building, and maintaining an account that consistently brings you back here, do you?" I queried if you were representing the bank. You clarified that you are her husband. I declared this as a private discussion. You countered it's not a professional one. I conceded, labeling it as desired. You suggested relocating your business elsewhere, mentioning reputable institutions in Nashville as alternatives. I questioned what profession you were engaged in. You responded that you are in music, specifically licensing, to which you added that it is commendable and creative work. However, you highlighted that this situation involves a distinct sphere high-level private wealth services, where such relationships are not commonplace. I then asked for an estimate of the value of your account, causing a subtle change in your expression. You don't have access to client accounts, he stated. I acknowledge that, I replied. However, I'm asking you to speculate. He remained silent. If you were aware, I continued, I doubt we would be in this room. I rose from my seat. I picked up the folder Preston had left on the table, the quarterly review, the allocation summaries, everything, and I held it for a moment. I want to express my gratitude for your frankness, I said. So let me reciprocate with honesty. I'm going outside to discuss with Preston the initiation of the process to close this account and transfer my funds to another financial institution. Not because I was instructed to do so, but because I have decided that a bank where the chief financial officer's husband feels it's his right to barge into client meetings and advise them to withdraw their money is not a bank that truly comprehends its responsibilities. Bradford looked at me. For the first time, an emotion other than confidence was visible on his face. What is the size of the account? He inquired. Speak to your wife, she's our CFO, I suggested. I require you to experience that moment as I did. I want you to sense the atmosphere. Sitting opposite me was Bradford Holt, seated on a chair pricier than my first vehicle. He donned a suit signaling his ease in such environments, almost an inherited right, and my presence seemed a curiosity needing justification. The room's light was that specific cool, white glow common to private banking offices, aiming to give an impression of accuracy and orderliness. Upon the table between us lay the quarterly review file labeled with my name, containing Preston's meticulous assessment of the preceding year's results. Bradford remained unaware of the contents within that file. This lack of knowledge was the crux of our predicament. He entered the room unaware of the crucial detail missing from his mental image, and constructed his strategy characterized by directness, assumed authority, veiled condescension, and professional concern on an inadequate basis. He believed he was dealing with a minor complication, confident that he could walk into rooms and find solutions. While correct about his ability, he erred concerning the problem at hand. What's the size of the account? He asked. Ask your wife, I replied. She is the CFO, I exited. Preston was standing in the corridor. His facial expression suggested he had grasped more than he had revealed. I want to initiate a transfer, I said. The entire account. I'll need the necessary documents. Upon hearing this, Preston momentarily closed his eyes. When he reopened them, they showed the gaze of a man calculating substantial professional damage. Sterling, let me make this clear. The discussion with Bradford Holt was not approved by the bank. His actions were utterly unsuitable. I acknowledge this. It's not a rebuke to you, as you've been outstanding. However, I can't continue in a location where I'm supervised by someone who isn't aligned with me. He nodded. We headed towards his office. Upon viewing the account details on his screen, he fell still. $512 million, he muttered softly. It wasn't a query. Yes, I confirmed. There was a brief silence between us. Preston stated that Bradford Holt had no official position at First Pacific Meridian and acted without authorization. Preston called me the next morning. The bank's president, Harriet Knowles, wished to speak with me directly. She expressed her apologies, clarity, and genuine concern. Not for me, but for the situation. She informed me that Bradford Holt had no institutional role at First Pacific Meridian and had acted entirely unauthorized. She presented substantial benefits to keep the account, yet I transferred it despite her professional and genuine approach. The decision was based on principle, not anger, as the feeling of being considered a burden rather than an asset made my stay untenable. Money can't be unlearned or forgotten, and a room's perception of you is indelible. The funds were relocated to Callaway and Pine, a private wealth management firm in Brentwood known for its boutique operations and discretion. Within 2 months, I learned from 3 different sources within the Nashville finance sector that Bradford Holt's commercial real estate holdings had been carrying substantial debt for nearly 18 months, with leveraged positions in Atlanta underperforming as expected. Discussions regarding extended credit facilities were underway between him and First Pacific Meridian. However, these talks grew complex post the account transfer. The complexity stems from the fact that when a bank loses almost $500 million and the immediate cause is linked to the CFO's husband, negotiations over credit extensions change dramatically. I can't provide specific details about what transpired within the bank. I won't claim absolute knowledge as I don't possess it. But I do know that Bradford Holt III stopped attending First Pacific Meridian Bank events just 4 months after my transfer. Moreover, Vivian, a highly competent financial professional, was going through a professionally challenging phase during this period. I didn't invent these circumstances. I simply claimed what was rightfully mine. There's something about Vivian that needs to be mentioned to complete and honestly portray this story. Around 6 months after the account transfer, she called me. It was a Sunday afternoon in early November. In the Hillsborough Village neighborhood where I'd recently purchased a renovated craftsman home with a basement recording studio, my phone displayed a number associated with an earlier era in my life. I answered. "I understand about Bradford and the meeting," she began. "Right," I replied. "Let me make this clear. I had no idea he would act that way. I never would have asked him to." "I get it," she said. There was a brief silence. "I owe you an apology," she continued. "Not for Bradford, but for something older than that." I stayed quiet, waiting. "The spreadsheet," she reminded me. A sensation stirred within my chest. "You undervalued the significance of your work," she admitted after 9 years. "It was more than just numbers. You were creating something tangible." From my current vantage point, I failed to discern its form. "You weren't inaccurate about the calculations then," I admitted truthfully. "The figures were what they were. The facts didn't tell the whole tale," she replied. "I understood that. I simply opted for a more streamlined examination." We conversed for roughly 20 minutes. It was not a reconciliation talk. Let me make that clear. We weren't two people rediscovering something. Instead, we were two individuals being truthful with one another over the chasm of everything that had transpired before. Before ending the call, she said something I've pondered often since then. "You created an astonishing structure, Sterling. I mean it without any complexity or ulterior motive. I am proud of you just as you would be proud of someone you were once intimately acquainted with." "I picked up some of that from observing you," I acknowledged, and that was true. What I comprehend now, contrasting it to my thoughts while dwelling in that Dickerson Pike apartment post-divorce, nibbling on cold rice and pondering my next move, is that success doesn't equate to revenge. This notion demands emphasis because there exists a narrative where Sterling employs his wealth to belittle those who undervalued him, labeling it as justice. However, this was not the case. Instead, I persisted in my work until it held value quantifiable by others. Bradford Holt didn't suffer any loss because of me. He lost due to prior choices concerning debt and leverage, unrelated to my presence. I simply dislodged a crucial prop from his foundation at an inconvenient moment. Vivian didn't incur any losses either. She remains the CFO of First Pacific Meridian Bank, building something genuine in her own manner with her unique tools. I no longer harbor any resentment regarding the divorce. Doubted myself for quite some time. The spreadsheet caused discomfort as it quantified something unproven to a figure yet unrevealed. Yet she wasn't incorrect. A plan demands certainty. She merely had a divergent tolerance for uncertainty compared to me. The catalyst, the lesson I wish you to grasp from this narrative, is the phase post-divorce, not the bank encounter. The 18 months devoid of spectators, when there was no imminent disclosure and nothing to validate either. When it was just me in a humble abode writing daily, trusting that my efforts were accumulating towards an unseen goal. That's where the 500 million truly originated. Not from skill, from consistently showing up in a space void of applause. Bradford Holt phoned me around 8 months after the bank gathering. I'm unsure how he procured my private number. In Nashville, once more, the city truly feels compact in significant ways. It was a Tuesday morning when my unrecognized phone rang during my coffee break at a cafe on 12th Avenue South. "Sterling," came his voice as I picked up. His usual boardroom aura was absent, replaced by something more human and admittedly intriguing. Bradford was the name he uttered. He began with an apology that was owed. The actions from that meeting were unacceptable, both in terms of professionalism and personal conduct. Several responses crossed my mind, but I opted for the straightforward one. "I acknowledge your statement," I replied. He made it clear that it wasn't about the money or the account. I was clueless. After a moment of silence, he admitted his misconception. "You thought I was a problem you could resolve neatly," he said. Vivian never spoke ill of me. Intrigued, I asked, "What made you think that?" He hesitated before replying. "I believed you were a problem I could solve tidily." He said was the most truthful thing in any of our conversations. "She's an exceptional individual," I acknowledged. "She always was," he agreed. "Yes, she is." We didn't converse for long. There wasn't much left to discuss, truth be told. He'd entered a scenario believing he comprehended it, only to realize he was mistaken at its core. Misunderstandings happen to people. The way you respond afterward reveals more about you than the initial error. I haven't communicated with him since. I don't wish him ill. He seldom crosses my mind. He's a chapter, not a continuous storyline. I'm composing this from the studio in the basement of my home in Hillsborough Village. The walls display 3 Grammy nominations, 2 for songwriting, 1 for production. A framed picture from a film licensing deal that triumphed at Sundance 3 years ago hangs there, as do countless notebooks. Yet certain aspects remain unaltered. The portfolio has changed. It isn't necessarily bigger. Markets fluctuate, investments diversify. True prosperity surpasses a solitary figure on a specific day. Yet it's tangible and substantial, a product of resilience in spaces where others doubted any progress was taking place. That's the tale I know how to narrate. At times, the individual who underestimated you was working with an outdated model of you. Occasionally, the person who scrutinized your life and saw uncertainty couldn't perceive what you were constructing yet. And sometimes, a man in a smart suit enters a room to dismiss you, and you have the opportunity to rise gradually, gather your files, and say earnestly, "Inquire from your wife about how much you've just cost this building, as she's the CFO, and she already knows."